Hey, this is Mark Stellingworth again with Brigadoon Radio. Today we have Paula Ashley, one of my good friends, who is a marketing strategist for the University of Toledo. This is her second Brigadoon. But you had like a gap.
I had a gap, yeah.
Right? You were you came to the second one, I think, and then now you're here at the seventh one. So tell me a little bit about your experience and.
Well, it's been truly amazing. One of the the things I really appreciate about my involvement with Brigadoon was I was able to help Mark Ross, its founder, build the brand.
And the awesome logo, I might add.
The logo was my company's responsibility. At the time, I was running a marketing firm, and he reached out to us, and I was really happy to be the participant in that. And he's taken that brand and just run with it. He's done a brilliant job defining the Brigadoon experience. And I have to say, from the previous experience to this one, I see that he's just made it better and better every year. And another thing about this year's that I think was distinct from 4 years ago was that there's an interpersonal component to it. Like before, it was very much about culture and strategy and politics, and that's not gone away. If anything, it's even better than it was. But there's also been this sort of personal level of exploration and what it means to be a person and what it means to be a Brigadoon participant that I think has just made it like another leap up.
Yeah, you know, that's something that has evolved over time, and I really agree with you. I think that, you know, it's a safe space, and people feel that way. And we have returning people, and I think that over time, those people feel more comfortable being vulnerable.
That's right.
And that vulnerability really resonates when you give a great talk. I mean, all the talks here have been fantastic, but the ones that you know are the opportunities for exposure vulnerability, I think are the most authentic and the most resonant.
I think that's really the real brilliance of Brigadoon, is that it's a space where, you know, you're not out here strutting your stuff. You're not trying to prove, you know, your theorem. You're here to exchange ideas, and some of those ideas can be very personal. And so from my experience of this Brigadoon, it was very much that kind of arc. So the first day, wasn't even in any kind of like official capacity. We had a little small group tour, and we were waiting for the bus to show up, and I started talking with Ben, the guy who wrote the book on China, right? And it took all of about 5 minutes for us to get to discover this point where we discovered we had this really deep personal religious experience in our background in common. And the entire time we were on the bus together for like an hour, we just did a deep dive into that and discussed, kind of took it down like, okay, so what was your experience and how was that for you? And how is this different over here? And it was just an incredibly great opportunity to kind of revisit sort of like the foundational platform of my life that you know, in my formative years. And then the day after that, we had Kelsey talk about her incredible trial with the death unexpectedly of her 42-year-old husband.
Right.
And you know, that was so resonant with where I was in my own life right now, because I had been through so many difficult personal situations, including the recent death of my last parent and situations in my family that were difficult. And I just, you know, it was like kind of a validation of the things that had brought me to that point, and some additional tools in my toolkit to keep going and make that a triumph instead of a tragedy. And then the day after that, it was like the step into the future with the fellow who had done the Longevity Project film.
Right.
And we had this amazing conversation afterwards that was all about his experience with just transformative experiences that had taken him on his path. And it was something that I had intuited for a while was where I wanted to go. And the conversation with him was just so completely affirming of that. And then to step back and look at the entire Brigadoon experience and see, wow, you know, the Brigadoon brand was leveraged from this vision of this town in Scotland that arises once every 100 years and is this magical place that's here for a day and then it disappears.
A moment in time, yes.
Right? And it was just like, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about how it was so like that for me.
Right.
It was like this magical thing that arose that gave me a chance to just kind of completely rethink the foundation of my existence and where I want to take it next. And I couldn't have done it without this space, without these group of people, without the environment that Mark Ross has created. And I just think I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here. So,
All right, last question.
All right.
What book would you recommend that you've read over the last 12 months, or movie that you've seen, or album you've listened to? What piece of media would you recommend to our viewers?
I'm going to recommend two, and
Okay.
And they again are like the same kind of thing. The first one is a book by Yuval Harari called *Sapiens*.
Great book.
It's been on the bestseller lists all over the place, and that book is kind of like a speed date through the history of Homo sapiens and how we came to dominate the earth. But the key takeaway for me in that book was the idea of fictive language.
Right.
It's not a term I had ever heard before, but I realized, fictive language is my craft, right? And fictive language is actually how human beings created the command and control environment that allowed us to organize in these like amazing ways that no other species has been able to do.
Wow.
And so that was a real fruitful path into all kinds of other thinking. And then the flip side of that would be a book I just recently experienced called Into the Magic Shop, that was written by a neuroscientist about his experience with basically like mindfulness, and how he learned it very young in his life. And I could go on and on about that one. But the way I see that book in conjunction with the other is that it's sort of like the tools that each individual needs to step out of the fictive language that's imposed upon them and create their own narrative. And so I can't recommend those two books more highly.
Wow, that is awesome.
Powerful stuff.
A pleasure, as always, to see you.
Great to see you too, my
Stay
friend.
out of trouble, young lady.
Will do.
And we'll see you around.
Thanks.